on this. Yes, if you look at the exam papers, it turns up every year. If you're interested in shareholder value and financialization, the lecture is relevant. Make good notes and bits of advice thrown in through the lecture. It's not all going to be around the slides. There is going to be an attempt to kind of connect what's happening in the world generally. I've mentioned kind of the horse meat scandal. Nobody so far has actually picked up on that it's been driven by shareholder value and the pursuit of shareholder value. It's all about criminal activity. It's all about kind of something else except the behaviour of the corporate enterprise. And also a management that's incentivised to generate shareholder value. What the food chain actually represents is this an activity where shareholder value should actually exist and be pursued in this manner? My own take on the scandal is, yes, it's driven by shareholder value, and if we accept that, then this is an entirely normal accident. We shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't actually think, hey, that's outrageous. It's a normal accident. When you've got kind of paper checks, you're going to get this. And also, when the buyers are incentivized to lower the price of the inputs, and the senior management are incentivized to generate increased returns, you use your power to push the problems down the chain. This is an entirely kind of normal accident. And I cannot understand why it's not being picked up in that fashion, but also kind of represents that I think currently in our learning we're ahead of the game. Because the issues of kind of shareholder value is that it's benign and it's something good. Well, up to a point it probably is, but there comes a point where everything feels over. Now, if you want adulterated food, and if you want kind of poorer products, we can continue to pursue this because ultimately our corporations have to generate, well, the investors demand that they generate 12 to 15% return on capital employed. And the only way you can do that is A, lower wages, or B, lower the price of the inputs. So what this lecture does is to build on, look at any newspaper, it's to build on what's going on here. What's going on here is that after about 5-6 years of recession and the banking crisis, the politicians and conventional economics is running out of ideas. Which leader to pull, what to do? And my argument is that this offers a unique opportunity for the discourse of management to have its say in what the next kind of 30-year experiment is going to be. And this course is about fitting the pieces, the jigsaw pieces together. I accept it's unsettling, and I accept it's pissed some of you off, but I would also argue, if you want stories in the box, well, you'll get lots of stories in the boxes. But the world is dynamic and it's moving on. And because it's moving on, things are changing. And if we're fitting the pieces together, it's also an acceptance that you could be sitting in a strategy lecture in 10 years' time and the exemplars of success will be different. It will no longer be Apple. It will no longer be the exemplars that have been conventionally used. Because the sources of success are not, I believe, clearly understood. And many of the sources of success are ephemeral. They're really short-lived. It's a transient kind of world. In terms of kind of exemplars of success are successful for a short period of time. Now, what that requires is you to do a bit of thinking. And what that does is actually puts the onus on you to say, how important is this advantage and how enduring is it? And what I will find, and I do talk to you, and I do talk to a lot of students, what I will get are two different things. One is, oh, that's hard, he doesn't help us. Well, I sit in my office and most of the time nobody comes to see me. That must be my fault. Second, you want a course that you don't have to think, there'll be lots of other courses to do. What I want is a course where things change and you can chew the pen top and say, hey, that source of advantage has changed. That's where the extemporising comes from. And what we've been doing is putting the jigsaw pieces together. It doesn't all come together till the end. But shareholder value is an instalment in your framework. And it's going to be an important topic. Because I've given you something critical on Porter, and I bet you at least 60 to 70% of you will use that information if the question turns up in the exam. I've given you something on resource-based theory, and again, if the question turns up, you will use it. So we've dealt with that bit. We've also looked at stakeholding, and I have posed a question, and I hope you've actually pondered about it. In whose interest should capitalism be run? And if I recall correctly from that lecture, there was a debate about who it should be run in the interest of. Look, we live in a democracy, and if you want to transpose one stakeholder advantage against another, you're always going to have this kind of tension that's emerging. And the one thing I can say for sure is, in terms of stakeholding, is that the world will look entirely different in 10 years' time. The debate is now about shareholder value. Should this be run as shareholder value? The long supply chains. Should power be exerted along the supply chain? Well, I didn't actually lecture on globalization. I gave you the slides. Do have a look at them. It's not a topic that really fires the imagination anymore. We've looked at sector matrix. And today, this is the last bit, the piece, before we get into issues related to financialisation and strategy. And that's the demands of shareholder value. And more importantly, financialisation. It's linked to widespread share ownership, and also it's the increasing use of financial measures of success, not productive, like market share, quality, etc. All those kind of issues, while still important, have been demoted in the pursuit of financial success. And if you're going to look at financialisation, be aware that I write in one aspect of financialisation. We're one of the first, as the research team was one of the first to that topic. But what you've got is financialisation discussed by, say, Krippner and Epstein in terms of the macroeconomy. The way I see financialisation is the interaction between the corporate economy and the household. And there's also another thematic that's generated in financialisation, which is the financialisation of daily life, which is largely about how it plays on a day-to-day basis. So if you're looking at financialisation, it's not all a uniformed type concept. It's used in different ways. And the way I'm going to use it is to look at the relationship between the corporate and the household. And the lecture that will make these points is a 5-section today. Well, it's a small conclusion. It's really 4 sections. I have to explain to you the descriptive bit. What is shareholder value? What is financialisation? And that's going to be the easy bit. What does the stock market, the capital market want, and what can management deliver? There is this happy ending in most of the case studies of purposive management who deliver. Well, you could quadruple the case studies about management that doesn't deliver, or the delivery is temporary. And my argument in this lecture, therefore, is the capital market becomes increasingly unreasonable, but makes life very difficult for management. The third section looks at how this actually plays in practice, where a CEO now spends more time doing a roadshow discussing with the large shareholders what the strategy is for the company and what the outcomes will be, as opposed to actually running the company. In terms of kind of macro implications, they're broad and they're still kind of in the process of, should we call it, work in progress. But the one thing that we did notice, and is probably a cause of the financial crisis, is that you cannot keep reducing labour's share in the economy. Because if you keep doing that, capitalism itself will stop working, because people have to spend for capitalism to work. It should be lost on nobody that in terms of the British economy, can you think of any other industry, except the finance industry, that was bust? Not technically, but absolutely bust. And the taxpayer had to bail them out, but the shareholder remained in place. This didn't wipe out the shareholder. So we're going to look at macro implications. And in terms of kind of conclusions, the conclusions are work in progress. They're modest, but also the lecture itself is drawn from the research that is freely available. I've got it on the course outline. I'll send you some other references. But the key references here, if you do want to do the essay on this, is the Economy and Society Special Issue on Shareholder Value. It's from 2000. The whole issue is related to shareholder value. So you'll get shareholder value from the German perspective, the United States, Britain. The whole issue is really useful. The second article is the Froud article, Financialisation in the Coupon Pool. I may actually have had a scan. I think I've scanned it and put it on Moodle. I just can't remember anymore. If I haven't, if it's difficult to find, I'll put it up. But the third article is actually the book, Financialisation for the Strategy.